Some days are meant to pass quietly, unnoticed, until a single sentence, just one, shatters everything you thought you knew about family, about your children, about trust. Like a chair suddenly breaking beneath you. For me, that sentence arrived right in the middle of the checkout line at Henderson's Market. I was holding a small vanilla cake, a simple little gesture I planned to bring to my in-laws' family lunch. An ordinary day, nothing remarkable. Until the cashier, an older man in his 60s with weathered, thoughtful eyes, suddenly froze. He looked at me with an expression like he'd just recognized an old, unspoken name. He tilted his head slightly and whispered, his voice so low only I could hear. "You're Caleb Marston's mother, aren't you? If so, you need to know this. Your daughter-in-law's family isn't struggling the way they claim. They come here every week buying expensive items, while your son pays for everything." Each word dropped into my ears slowly, heavily like stones falling to the bottom of a well. I stood there, frozen, breath suspended, body unable to react. The cashier touched my hand, just a light, cautious tap, urgent but respectful, before quickly pulling back as if afraid he had crossed the line. Then he went right back to scanning the next customer's groceries. No eye contact, no explanation, just that sentence, left behind like a cold needle lodged deep in my mind. I held the receipt, unable to see the numbers clearly. I drifted toward the back exit like a shadow, trying to keep my balance, trying to calm the tremor climbing up my chest. I took the rear path outside. I needed air, a moment alone with my own thoughts. The wind sweeping down from the Blue Ridge carried the scent of pine and damp earth. It should have made it easier to breathe, but no. My chest stayed heavy, as if someone had placed a stone on top of it. My name is Eleanor Marston, 68 years old. I live alone, surviving on a modest pension after a lifetime of physical work. I'm used to saving every penny, used to simple meals, used to a life that doesn't ask for much besides a little peace. But life rarely lets us stay still. After my husband died, Caleb, my only son, became everything. I raised him, protected him, sometimes to the point of forgetting that I, too, needed someone to protect me. Caleb married Marina 3 years ago. Since then, I've tried, truly tried, to open my heart to her family. They always spoke of hardships, always mentioned medical bills, car repairs, prescriptions, overdue payments. And I believed them. I felt sorry for them. Maybe that was my mistake. I followed the brick wall toward the row of metal dumpsters behind the store. It felt absurd, crouching behind a trash bin at my age, like someone spying on an ex-lover. But I did it for one simple reason. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. From my hiding spot, I could see the entire parking lot. Caleb was waiting for me in our old sedan. He thought I was just buying a cake. He didn't know his mother was about to step into a battle neither of us had prepared for. The cashier's words were played on a loop in my head. They buy expensive items every week, while your son pays for everything. My heartbeat thudded heavily. I gripped the edge of the metal bin. The faint smell of garbage rose around me, damp and unpleasant. But I stayed, because in a few minutes, I would know. And I did. Douglas Clark Marina's father walked out through the front doors. The bag in his hand wasn't plastic. It wasn't groceries. It wasn't anything he'd ever claimed they could only buy by borrowing money. It was a bag from Ashford & Company, one of the most expensive stores in all of Western Carolina. Black bag, gold lettering, elegant, luxurious, the kind of bag you only hold when you've bought something I would have to save for months to even consider. It felt like someone grabbed me by the hair and yanked me backward. Douglas didn't look like a man drowning in debt, didn't move like someone burdened by hardship. He walked lightly, almost cheerful-like, a man who just rewarded himself with something extravagant. He headed to his vehicle, but not the old battered SUV they told Caleb was barely holding on. No, it was a brand new crossover, barely 6 months old, the silver paint glinting under the afternoon sun. Douglas looked around the parking lot, eyes sharp and cautious, as if afraid someone might catch him standing beside that expensive car and that luxurious bag. I sank deeper into the shadows. In that moment, my mother's heart stretched so tight it hurt to breathe. I wanted to step out, confront him, demand, "Why are you lying to my son?" But I knew Not now, not like this. I needed proof. I needed the full truth. I needed to protect Caleb by not acting recklessly. Douglas got into his car, closed the door gently, started the engine, and drove off. Smooth, effortless, and I knew my search for the truth had only just begun. If this story reminds you of a moment when something didn't feel right, you're not alone. And if you want to follow this journey, one I myself still don't know the ending of, you're welcome to stay with this channel. If stories like this, real, raw, and painfully human, feel worth continuing, you can hit subscribe so we don't lose each other in the next chapter. Sometimes all it takes is one person listening for a story to keep being told. I stayed behind the dumpsters for a few more minutes after Douglas drove out of the parking lot, as if my body needed extra time to catch up with what my eyes had just seen. The wind picked up, carrying pine and damp earth, but my chest remained tight, squeezed by something I couldn't name. I tried taking a deep breath, but it barely filled my lungs. A part of me wanted to march back into the store, confront the cashier, ask him for every detail. But another part, the part that recognizes truth even when it hurts, already knew. His warning wasn't baseless. I leaned against the cold brick wall. One thought kept circling. How long has this been going on? How long have they been spinning this sob story to drain money from Caleb? I looked out at the parking lot. Everything appeared normal. A mother lifting her child, an employee gathering carts, shiny cars pulling in and out. But for me, the entire world had tipped to a different angle. I straightened my scarf and stepped out from my hiding place. The first few steps were unsteady, not because of age, but because the truth had hit me too hard, too fast. Caleb was in the driver's seat, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel the way he always did when he was lost in thought. He opened the door when he saw me, a crease quickly forming on his forehead. "Mom, are you okay? You took a while." I forced a smile. "Just long lines, sweetheart." A lie, and it sat heavily on my tongue. But I wasn't ready, not here, not in this parking lot, to break my son's heart. Caleb backed out of the spot. Sunlight streamed through the windshield, falling across his face, and for a moment, he looked older than 30. Tired, worn down in ways I hadn't allowed myself to see. And then I remembered. The countless nights Marina called him crying, complaining about bills, medical appointments, car breakdowns. Each time, Caleb dropped everything to rush over like a firefighter, his shoulders always tense, his voice always apologetic, as if disaster would strike if he didn't respond immediately. I used to think he was lucky to have a wife who trusted him so deeply. Now I saw it for what it was, a weight of obligation, twisted and manipulated until it bled him dry. I glanced out the rear window, toward the place Douglas had stood minutes earlier. His eyes scanning the parking lot, guarded, wary, were still vivid in my mind. No one looks that cautious unless they're hiding something. The road to the in-laws' house wound through a small forest, red maples shedding their leaves on either side. I normally love this stretch of road, quiet, calming, but today, even the falling leaves felt like warnings. Caleb talked about work, his demanding boss, an upcoming deadline. I nodded, but none of it made it through. My mind gnawed at one thought. If they lied about a car, what else have they lied about? I looked at my son, the faint circles under his eyes, proof of the extra hours he worked, so Marina's family could make it through. Felt like bruises on my own heart. He always described those sacrifices as moral duty, not exploitation. I swallowed hard, tasting something metallic. "Caleb," I began slowly. "Has Marina said anything new about her family situation?" He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Same stuff, Mom. Daddy Clark still isn't getting enough hours. His condition needs monitoring. Marina's been really stressed." I stared straight ahead, keeping my face neutral, but in my mind, I saw Douglas again, relaxed, cheerful, walking toward a brand new car with a luxury bag in hand. The in-laws lived in a quiet suburb. As soon as we turned onto the cherry-lined street, I noticed things that didn't match the narrative of hardship Marina always described. The front lawn was perfectly trimmed. The wooden fence had fresh paint. The exterior walls gleamed with a new coat, clean and polished. I glanced at Caleb. "You said they've been struggling, but nothing here looks like they're putting off repairs." Caleb shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Marina said her dad's been picking up weekend shifts to cover that. You know how they are, style over comfort. They always want the house looking nice. I only nodded, but inside, something in me shifted, tilted toward a truth I could no longer ignore. Caleb didn't know. Those sacrifices didn't come from them. They came from my son. Marina opened the door with a bright smile, the kind of brightness people in real financial trouble simply don't have. She wore a high-quality dress, soft fabric, perfectly fitted at the waist. The color was trendy, her hair freshly styled. And the perfume, elegant, expensive, the exact one from an ad I'd seen on TV. Definitely not the got it on sale for $19 story she liked to tell. "Eleanor, I'm so happy you're here," she hugged me. And when her arm brushed my back, I noticed something else. Her hands were soft. Not the hands of someone fighting to make ends meet. Behind her, the living room came into view, rearranged, updated. A new caramel leather sofa, a glass coffee table, an imported vase, and most obvious of all, a brand new high-end TV mounted on the wall. I knew the price by the curve of the screen. Heat rose in my chest, not anger exactly, but something close to shame. Shame that I hadn't seen any of this sooner. Marina beamed, gesturing us toward the dining room. "Dad's in the kitchen. He's excited to have you over." My stomach twisted. Douglas in the kitchen? Yet at the store, he'd acted like he'd been out all morning. Part of me wanted to walk straight to the kitchen and look him in the eye. Not to speak, just to stare, and let him decide whether to lie or tell the truth. But I held back. Not yet. Lunch was arranged like a small feast. Fresh seafood, premium cuts of meat. Imported seasoning jars I knew weren't cheap. Every dish whispered the same truth. They weren't poor. They'd never been poor. They were only poor when they talked to Caleb. I sat down, folding my hands in my lap to hide their slight tremble. Marina chatted about the house, about her father's birthday party plans, about little luxuries she wanted to try this summer. Everything extravagant, everything inconsistent with the struggling family narrative. Caleb smiled, nodded, completely unaware. Not a flicker of doubt, not a single suspicion. My chest tightened. A question rose inside me, pressing so hard I had to grip the napkin. How long has my son been deceived like this? And worse, how long have I unknowingly helped the lie continue? In that moment, surrounded by this curated luxury, I knew our story, this family's story, Caleb's story, was about to cross into a place none of us could turn back from. I sat at the dining table, my hands folded neatly over the cream-colored napkin, trying to keep them from trembling. The entire room smelled of herbs, melted butter, and rich sauces. Luxury far beyond anything I had cooked or tasted in my entire life. Marina brought out 2 more dishes. Fresh salmon roasted with lemon, and a plate of asparagus arranged as if it belonged in an upscale restaurant in downtown Asheville. "I know you like lighter meals, Mom," Marina said with a bright smile as she set the tray in front of me. I nodded. My smile looked calm, mature, but inside, my heart was free-falling. Not because of the food, not because of the elegance, but because of the quiet arrogance beneath it all. The kind only people who are not struggling financially ever reveal without realizing. Douglas stepped out from the kitchen, still wearing an apron. I looked closely. The apron was spotless, not a trace of grease, not a splatter of sauce. No one who's been cooking an elaborate meal comes out looking that clean. He bowed his head and greeted me. "Eleanor, wonderful, you're here. Lunch got a little fancy today, hope you don't mind." I looked at him, and the image of him smiling beside that brand new car earlier flashed through my mind. If I hadn't seen that, I might have believed him too. "Thank you, Douglas," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Caleb sat beside Marina, her hand resting gently on his arm. They looked like any young couple planning a future together. If only that future wasn't built on a story that kept shifting under our feet. "Caleb told me you've been wanting to buy a new heater but haven't saved enough yet?" Marina said as she poured orange juice into my glass. I looked at her. Her eyes flickered just for a second. Not with concern, not with empathy, but like someone mentally marking a new opportunity to guilt trip later. I smiled. "Oh, I was just talking out loud. Nothing urgent." I said it as if to reassure her, but really, I wanted to see her reaction. Marina nodded too quickly, almost like she was hiding disappointment, and that hurt in a way I didn't expect. Douglas filled Caleb's glass and his own with red wine. I glanced at the label, an imported bottle. I had seen it in a catalog once. It wasn't cheap. "This bottle, also part of a big sale, Douglas?" I asked lightly. He hesitated, just a second, but a second is more than enough when someone is lying. "Ah, yes, yes," he laughed. "The store had a surprise clearance." I nodded, my mind quietly collecting the pieces: the sale on their new leather sofa, the clearance TV, the discounted designer clothes, the unexpected markdown on expensive wine. No real life is that lucky. Only rehearsed lies follow that menu. As we ate, I could barely swallow. Each time I lifted my fork, something pulled tight inside my chest. Caleb laughed, complimented Marina's cooking, talked about work, about next month's plans, about poor Daddy Clark trying to work extra shifts to keep things afloat. And every word was a knife to my heart. Because he believed it, absolutely. Believed it enough to sacrifice his own health. Believed it enough to cut back on his own needs. Believed it without ever questioning a single thing. Meanwhile, Marina just nodded along, guiding the narrative the way a conductor guides a symphony. After lunch, I got up to wash my hands. On my way down the hallway, I happened to glance toward the bedroom. The door wasn't fully closed, and that was when I saw the first crack in their perfect performance. A black designer shopping bag leaned against the chair, the same type of bag Douglas had carried earlier at the store. I slowed my steps, looked closer. Inside were several pieces of clothing, tags still attached, a dress, a coat, and the small pouch holding a bottle of perfume. I didn't touch anything. I didn't need to. Just seeing it sent a cold rush down my spine. I knew that perfume. The kind you hurry past in a mall because the price tag alone makes you feel small. Marina never talked about shopping. She only talked about bills, debt, Dad's medical problems, job instability. But the perfume was right there in her room. I returned to the table, keeping my expression as neutral as possible. If I said what I'd seen, Caleb wouldn't believe me. He would think I was being unfair or just not liking Marina, like the first time I told him her eyes were too hard to read. A mother trying to save her son must know when to stay silent. After the meal, Marina took Caleb to the backyard to show him her new gardening project. Douglas invited me into the kitchen for tea. I sat across from him, watching those large hands make the tea. Hands that did not look like the hands of a man, whose hours were cut because of company downsizing. Not rough, not tired, not marked by strain. I raised my gaze. "Douglas, how's your health?" "Marina said your condition hasn't improved." He chuckled dismissively. "Oh, much better. You know doctors. They exaggerate everything to keep the visits coming." That answer slid out too easily, too casually, too carelessly, as if the whole illness had never been real. I set my teacup down. "When did you switch to the new car?" He froze. 1 second. 2. Then. "Oh, a friend lent it to me. Our old one is in the shop." I nodded again, showing nothing. When Caleb and Marina returned, Douglas avoided meeting my eyes. He must have sensed that I knew something. As we got ready to leave, Marina hugged me again. "Just tell us if you need anything, okay? Caleb and I will always take care of you." Her voice slid over me like oil, smooth, warm. But something inside me bristled, sharp as thorns. On the drive home, Caleb asked, "Mom, what did you think of Marina's family today?" I looked straight ahead, the long road stretching under the fading light, and for the first time in years, I answered without sugarcoating. "Sweetheart, some things look beautiful and still aren't real." Caleb turned to me, frowning slightly. I didn't explain, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew. To save my son from a very big lie, sometimes a mother must walk a long road of silence. That evening, when Caleb dropped me off in front of my small apartment, it took me a few seconds to step out of the car, as if my body wasn't ready yet for the silence waiting behind that door. He asked again, "Mom, are you sure you're okay? You seem off." I gave him a smile. The kind mothers spend a lifetime practicing so their children won't worry. I'm just a little tired. Long day. But I wasn't tired. I was afraid. Afraid that what I saw at Marina's house wasn't coincidence. Afraid the cashier's warning was the beginning, not the end. Afraid, most of all, that I had allowed this to go on far too long. Caleb waited until I got inside before driving away. As the door clicked shut, I leaned against it for a long moment. The apartment was pitch dark, so quiet I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat. It felt like I was holding a fragile thread, and if I tugged just a little, everything would unravel. I turned on the kitchen light and poured myself a glass of water. The glass trembled slightly, not because I was weak, but because my hands had been cold ever since I left Marina's house. Images from that afternoon replayed like a film stuck on loop. The luxurious dishes covering the kitchen counter, the imported beef, the fresh produce that only upscale grocery stores carry, the new TV, the new sofa, the wine rack lined with bottles that cost nearly a week's worth of my groceries, and Marina in that red silk dress that looked like it came straight from a magazine cover. I took a deep breath, trying to reason through it. Could a family who couldn't afford their gas bill live like that? No, not in this world. Never. I set the glass down and sat at the dining table, the same place where I often calculated every penny. And it was there that I knew I needed to look back at everything from the beginning. I opened my old notebook and flipped to the pages where I'd written down all the times Caleb and I had helped them. How many late-night calls from Marina? How many times had Douglas had chest pains, needed medication, or needed an urgent test? How many times did they say they were just a little short on rent? Each time, a few $100s, every 2 weeks, a new emergency. I stared at those tiny numbers, and somehow they hurt more than the zeros they lacked. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to cars fade down the street, voices thinning out until the world went quiet enough for my mind to finally grow sharp. I knew I had to watch, observe, gather more. I couldn't act without proof. If I was wrong, Caleb would think I hated Marina, and I would lose my son. The next morning, I received a text. Unknown number. But the moment I opened it, my heart slipped a beat. A photo. A grocery receipt. Total. $412.79. Items. French wine. Imported beef. Specialty cheese. Exotic fruits. Premium Italian sauces. Artisan baked goods. And the purchaser's name, Douglas Harrow. The message beneath. I thought you should know what they bought. That same day, they told your son they couldn't afford medication. Eli, the cashier. I sat completely still. In the world of people who are truly struggling, $412 isn't a shopping trip, it's a week of wages. I thanked Eli and asked why he was reaching out again. His reply was short. I see you the way I saw my own mother years ago. I don't want history repeating. My eyes burned. Sometimes strangers have the courage to say what our own family refuses to admit. But that wasn't the end. Around 3 p.m, while I was washing a glass, the phone rang again. Another unknown number. The moment I heard the voice, I recognized it. Hermione, the older woman I overheard in the parking lot that day. Eleanor? I'm sorry for calling out of the blue, but I think you need to know a few things. Her voice was soft but quick, like she was afraid someone might overhear. I've known the Harrow family for a long time, and I know what they've been telling your son about struggling financially. But the truth isn't like that. I gripped the phone tighter. Hermione told me. They recently threw Douglas a birthday party with professional catering and imported liquor. 3 weeks ago, they remodeled their kitchen, new cabinets worth more than several months of my rent. Nearly every week, premium grocery deliveries arrived at their door. Marina bought dresses at least twice a month, all from very high-end stores. And then she said something that pierced straight through me. Eleanor, the entire neighborhood knows they're well off, everyone, except your son. My knees weakened and I leaned against the wall. Hermione continued. I'm calling because you seem like someone who's being kept in the dark, and I don't want to see anyone else taken advantage of. When the call ended, I just stood there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, listening to my own heavy breathing. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It wasn't misunderstanding. It wasn't pride, or maybe they're just private. This was a pattern, a habit, a long-running scheme. That evening, Caleb stopped by with a box of donuts from his favorite place. He had no idea that earlier that same day I'd received not one, but two more pieces of proof of how thoroughly he was being deceived. "Mom," he said, slipping off his jacket. "Marina says her dad needs more tests. I'll probably have to help out again this week. His health isn't good." I looked straight into his eyes, not with anger, not with accusation, just sorrow. A sorrow deep enough that it didn't need words. "Caleb, are you sure that's true?" He laughed softly, the kind of laugh you give when you trust someone without hesitation. "Mom, Marina would never lie to me. They're really going through a tough time." I clenched my hands under the table to keep from crying. The hardest part of being a mother isn't raising your child. It's watching them walk into a storm they don't even see. "Sweetheart," I whispered, "if someday things start to look different from what they've told you, would you tell me?" He put a hand on my shoulder. "Mom, that day won't come." I smiled, but inside I knew that day was coming fast. After Caleb left, I sat in the soft glow of the kitchen light and wrote on the last page of my notebook. "No more doubt. They're taking advantage of my son, and I need more proof, much more, before he gets hurt again." I closed the notebook, placed my hand on top of it, and whispered, "Caleb, I won't let them blind you any longer." The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. I hadn't slept enough, but clarity comes from worry. The kind of worry only older mothers truly understand. It doesn't make you shake. It doesn't make you frantic. It simply wakes you with resolve. I brewed a pot of black tea, set my old mug on the wooden table, and sat in silence. No radio, no TV. Just the sounds outside the window, early birds, the distant hum of traffic in Greensboro, and the soft brushing of leaves that felt like a quiet warning that the day ahead would be long. Then my phone buzzed, a message. The same number as before, Eli, the cashier. I opened it and my heart tightened immediately. Another receipt. I zoomed in. Total, $587.21. The items were so familiar by now, it almost made me laugh through the despair. 2 bottles of French champagne, lobster, the most expensive Italian cheeses, handmade tarts, a box of high-end cosmetics, a newly released perfume, the same one a girl at the pharmacy once told me was a luxury pick. I checked the date, 3 days ago. The exact day Marina texted Caleb saying they couldn't afford medication for her dad. I sat completely still. It wasn't the dollar amount that stunned me, it was the parallel lies. One hand pleading poverty, the other hosting a feast. Eli's message underneath contained just 3 words. "They do this often." I wanted to ask more, but Eli had already said enough. Near noon, Hermione called again. Her voice was lower this time, like someone afraid of being overheard. "Eleanor, have you reached it yet?" "Reached what?" I asked. "The truth everyone around here knows. Except your son." I tightened my grip on the phone. Hermione continued. "They had a little gathering last night. I won't ramble, but let me tell you one thing." Then she described it. Marina arrived in an emerald green dress so expensive Hermione had seen it displayed at the boutique downtown. The whole street saw a catering service bringing in 3 trays of hot food premium roasted meats, grilled salmon, fruit salad arranged like something from a wedding banquet. They even pushed in a cart with red wine, $80 a bottle. A sour ache rose in my throat. Hermione lowered her voice even more. "They're feeding Caleb a story about hardship, but they're spending money like old money heirs. Your son is being used, Eleanor." I didn't respond right away. It felt like I was standing in a cold room with gusts of wind coming from every direction, yet every gust whispered the same thing. "They see your son as supply, not family." Hermione sighed. "I know this is painful, but sometimes, to save someone, you have to look straight at the face of what's hurting them, even if it cuts." All I could manage was, "Thank you, Hermione." That afternoon, I went for a walk around the neighborhood, trying to clear my mind. But the more I walked, the more Hermione's words clung to me like echoes. Why hadn't I seen this sooner? The Harrows lived only 20 minutes away, yet I always assumed they were simply trying to push through a tough period. I believed Marina's stories. She knew exactly how to evoke sympathy. But once a truth shows its face, you can't force it back into the shadows. Around 4 p.m., just as I returned home, another message arrived from Eli, this time not a receipt. A short text. They ordered a dim sum spread for this weekend, over $300, and they added a rare Bordeaux to the list, you should know. I had to grip the back of a chair because my knees weakened. Marina had called Caleb that very morning asking for money to pay for her father's injections. Caleb had sighed, furrowed his brow, opened his wallet without hesitation. And meanwhile, they were ordering rare Bordeaux while my son worked overtime to pay for it. I sank into a chair, pressing my hands to my head. It felt like I was watching my whole life on replay, not to reminisce, but to ask myself, how long have I been this naive? That night, as I ate chicken soup alone, my phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "Mom, Marina says her dad isn't doing well. I'm planning to send them a little extra tonight." I put my spoon down. I couldn't swallow another bite. Two pains twisted inside me at once. My son didn't know he was being deceived, and he trusted the very people who should have protected him like family. I typed back, "Caleb, are you sure that's true?" He replied almost instantly, "Mom, why do you doubt it? Marina would never lie to me. They're really struggling." I began typing a truth my fingers hesitated to finish. Sometimes, people are better at lying than we expect. But I deleted it, word by word. Instead, I wrote, "If you're free tomorrow, come by. I'd like to see you." I needed to look him in the eyes. I needed to ask myself how I could reveal the truth without shattering him. And more importantly, if I spoke too soon, I could lose his trust entirely. After putting the phone down, I walked to the window. The sky had darkened. Street lights flickered on one by one, and in that moment, I finally understood something every mother knows but avoids touching. To save your child from a lie, you must gather more truth than you think you'll ever need. And I knew that tonight would be long. I opened my notebook again, the one where I had begun recording every observation, every financial emergency, every inconsistency from the Harrow family. I added a few more lines. $412 receipt. $587 receipt. Catering dinner. Boutique dress. Bordeaux order. Neighbor confirms luxury lifestyle. Then I wrote the final line. If they dare live in luxury using my son's money, they can dare worse. And as I set the pen down, I knew I had stepped into a new phase. No longer suspicion. No longer passive watching. But preparing for confrontation with the truth, with my son, and with my own mother's heart. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a steaming cup of tea, staring out the window at the pale gray sky. Something felt heavier than usual. The air, my thoughts, my heart. I knew whatever I was about to learn wouldn't be easy to swallow. And just as the intuition of a 70-year-old mother would predict, my phone buzzed before I even finished my first sip. A message from Eli, just one line. "They're here again today. Brace yourself." I set the phone down, took a long, steady breath, then opened the next message. This time, not a receipt. A photo of Douglas's cart at checkout. Eli had zoomed in from afar, careful not to be seen. I brought my phone closer. A box of imported chocolate, nearly $40. A bottle of reserve red wine, 3 tubs of premium ice cream. A bag of specialty coffee, the same kind Caleb once said, "Mom, I want to try it, but it's too expensive." And a gift box, neatly wrapped, the type people buy only when they're preparing for a celebration. At the bottom of the picture, purchaser, Douglas Harrow. Looking at it, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. It was something colder, a hollowing out, the kind of emptiness that comes when everything finally makes cruel sense. I texted Eli back. "Thank you. Please don't risk yourself for me anymore. He replied, It's not for you. It's for your son. He doesn't deserve this. I closed the phone, my hands trembling in a different way now, not from fear, but from the realization that all the pieces were snapping together with merciless clarity. Around noon, as I was slicing an apple, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, Hermione stood there, her shopping basket in her arms, her face carrying a hesitant concern. Eleanor, I don't like meddling in other people's affairs, but what I saw this morning... I invited her in. She sat down, placed the basket in her lap, and lowered her head as if choosing her words carefully. The Harrows just received a large delivery. I recognize the logo. It's the most expensive home decor store in the whole region. My heart thudded once. Hermione leaned closer. You know those decorative lighting pieces they sell? None of them costs under $200. I heard the kitchen sounds around me, but my mind drifted far, as if the present moment had been peeled away. They also had workers installing new wall shelving. I'd estimate that set at over $100. I asked, unable to hide the bitterness. They bought all that. Right after asking my son for money? Hermione looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Eleanor, I don't think they're just relying on him. I think they're living off him. The words were soft, but they fell like a stone. I clasped my hands beneath the table to hide the shaking. When Hermione left, I stood by the door watching her walk slowly across the courtyard. The cold hallway breeze hit my hands, stinging the skin. But I didn't close the door. Some truths come in whether we're ready or not. I returned to the table, opened my notebook and wrote, Gourmet cart this morning. Home decor delivery. New shelving installation. Wrapped gift box. Imported chocolate plus reserve wine. Then I added 2 more words. Birthday party? I wasn't sure, but every sign pointed in the same direction. A celebration. A planned event. An expensive one. Meanwhile, Caleb was working overtime to send money for medication. Later that afternoon, it began to rain lightly. I watched the droplets streak down the window like someone was washing off the pretty paint that had been covering the truth. My phone buzzed again. A picture from Eli, another receipt. Total, $636.40. Shrimp, wine, cheese, tarts, and an imported fruit arrangement that costs more than half a month of my groceries. A handwritten note in the corner of the receipt. For Saturday night, delivery. I pressed a hand to my mouth. They weren't just hosting a dinner. They were hosting a major party with scheduled delivery. And I wondered, how many times had Caleb stopped himself from buying something he wanted, just so he could afford this? I wondered, how many nights had Marina cried to him about hardship? I wondered, what part of their story was ever true? But even as I asked, the answer was already there. Later that night, just as I was about to turn off the lights, Caleb sent a message. Mom, I'm a little tired today, and Marina says her dad is really weak. I think I'll stop by tomorrow to give them a little more. I read the message, then read it again. I wanted to say, no, don't. I wanted to scream the truth. I wanted to look him in the eyes and ask him if he understood how deeply he was being misled. But I didn't. Instead, I typed slowly. Caleb, do you think maybe they should try to manage on their own for a little while? He replied immediately. Mom, they have no one else but me. I closed my eyes. 1 second. 2. Then I wrote, Come by tomorrow. There's something I need to talk to you about. He sent back, Sure, Mom. And don't worry, okay? Those last 3 words, don't worry, felt like someone erasing the final lines of a painting called Trust. I didn't sleep that night. I paced between the living room and the kitchen like someone searching for a small escape hidden among old memories. A mother always knows when her child is in danger. But this time, the danger didn't come from an accident or illness or a reckless mistake. It came from my son's own kindness. A good man, standing in front of people who know exactly how to exploit goodness. I sat down, opened my notebook, and wrote the final line for the day. The truth is approaching, and I can't afford to be slower than it. That Sunday morning, I woke earlier than usual. I wiped down the kitchen table, tucked a few old cookies into a tin, straightened the tablecloth, as if I were preparing to welcome an important guest. Not for appearances, but because I needed my mind steady for what was coming. Caleb was coming over, and something deep inside me knew today would change the way he saw the world. Around 10 a.m., I heard the spare key turning in the lock. Caleb always used it when visiting me on weekends. I stood up before he stepped inside, though my heart still dropped like it had missed a beat. He opened the door, smiling. "Mom, I brought you coffee, the kind you like." I tried to smile back, but I knew my eyes betrayed me. Caleb set the cup on the table and sat down, rubbing his forehead like someone already worn thin. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked, though the answer was written in the slump of his shoulders. He sighed, tilting his head as if searching for the right words. "Mom, Marina was crying last night. Her dad, apparently he needs a minor procedure. They don't have enough. I think I'm going to send them 200 today, just to help out." 200, just 200. How could a number so small hurt so deeply? Not because of the money, but because I knew exactly where every dollar was going. I clasped my hands beneath the table-old hands, shaking slightly, but steady in purpose. "Caleb, are you sure that's true?" He frowned. "Mom, I know you care about me, but why are you doubting this? Marina would never. She's very sincere." I looked straight into his eyes, the same eyes I'd watched for 30 years, through fevers, school tests, heartbreaks, and growth spurts that outpaced my ability to catch up. And then I asked the question I had prepared for 3 days. "Have you ever seen any hospital papers from her dad? Any bills that match what they've told you?" Caleb leaned back. Not much, but enough to make my heart tighten. "Mom, what are you implying?" he asked softly, but there was a wall forming underneath, a wall Marina had built carefully, brick by brick. I knew I had 2 choices, stay silent and let him sink deeper, or open everything. And when he said he would send more money today, I understood. My silence had become a kind of participation. I stood up, walked to the drawer beside the stove, and took out the notebook and the printed receipts Eli had sent me. I placed the notebook in front of him. "Mom, what is this?" I opened to the first page, said nothing, let him read. The $412 receipt, the day they said they couldn't afford medication. The $587 receipt, the day they claimed the electricity might get cut off. The $636 receipt, preparing for the weekend party. Then the pictures, the overflowing cart with wine, cheese, chocolate, imported fruits, champagne, and a pre-wrapped gift box. Caleb read line after line, item after item, like someone trying to swallow a pill far too large. I watched his shoulders sag. "Mom, who sent you all this?" he whispered. "The cashier you always see when you shop for them," I said. "He's seen too much, and he couldn't watch you be taken advantage of any longer." Caleb swallowed hard. I could hear it. "And this," I turned the page, "is from their neighbor. She saw the catering, the new dresses, the remodeled kitchen, the furniture deliveries." He put a hand to his forehead, fingers trembling. "Mom, no. Marina, she wouldn't. You're misunderstanding." I rested my hand on the table, not touching him, but close enough for him to feel I was still with him. "Caleb, I wish I were misunderstanding, truly. I wish everything I've seen and everything others have told me was wrong. But look, everything lines up into one story." Caleb shook his head, not sharply, but like a man losing his balance. "But they said they're struggling. Her dad." I spoke softly, pulling each word from the deepest part of me. "Sweetheart, poor people don't buy Bordeaux. People in crisis don't remodel kitchens. People who can't pay bills don't hire catering. And good people Don't let another family's son carry every burden for them. Caleb looked back down at the notebook as if hoping it would magically erase itself. Then he said the sentence that twisted something inside me. Mom, if this is true, then the last 3 years, I've been tricked? I felt tears pushing up, but I held them. No, Caleb, you weren't tricked. You trusted. And you trusted because you're a good man. He didn't answer. He just sat there, both hands in his hair, like a boy trying to understand why the storm chose him. We sat in silence long enough to hear every tick of the clock. Caleb stared out the window, as if the answers outside were easier to face than the ones in the room. Finally, he whispered, Mom, what do I do now? I didn't give him advice, not yet. I slid the notebook toward him. Read everything, slowly. Once you fully understand, we'll figure out the next step together. Caleb stayed there a moment, his palm resting on the paper as if trying to feel something real when the rest of his world was slipping into falsehood. And I knew this moment was the first time my son saw the truth, even if he didn't want to see it. When he finally stood to leave, Caleb paused at the door, his eyes red but clearer. Mom, thank you. I think I've never looked at things from your side before. I touched his arm gently. It's okay, sweetheart. Truth doesn't come when we want it. It comes when it must. He nodded, the first real nod in a long time. And when the door closed behind him, I sank into my chair, a hand covering my mouth. Not out of pain, but because, for the first time in weeks, I felt something lift. Just a little, but for a mother, sometimes that's enough to keep going. 2 days after the morning Caleb read my notebook, Greensboro had grown so cold that every breath turned into a pale cloud in the air. I was washing dishes when my phone vibrated. It was Caleb. His voice was low, slightly hoarse like someone who hadn't slept all night. Mom, can I come over for a bit? I dried my hands, steadying my voice. Of course, sweetheart, anytime. He arrived just 10 minutes later. No coffee, no donuts, no familiar smile. Just Caleb tired, confused, carrying a fresh kind of hurt he hadn't yet found a name for. He sat down, twisting the cap of a water bottle between his fingers. Mom, you were right. I didn't rush him. Caleb took a long, shaky breath. Yesterday I went to Marina's house. I paid attention, and for the first time, I saw things I'd never really looked at before. He paused, as though organizing a series of scenes that had collided into one moment of clarity. There was no surgery. I know because her dad was walking around just fine. He even carried a big box from the garage into the kitchen. I tightened my hands in my lap so I wouldn't respond too quickly. Caleb continued. And in the kitchen, I saw 2 bottles of French champagne, the same kind from the receipt you showed me. And I asked Marina why they bought them when things were supposedly tight. He swallowed hard. She said, a family friend gifted them. But Mom, they had 2 bottles, side by side, still sealed. I nodded softly, not in triumph, but in the shared ache of realization. Caleb ran a hand over his forehead. I noticed the dress she wore yesterday, too. Mom, that's the boutique dress I remember her looking at online. It costs almost $400. I remember because I told her, it's beautiful, but too expensive. And yesterday, she wore it like it meant nothing. I stayed quiet, letting him speak, letting him see. Then there was the electric bill, he whispered. Marina told me it was overdue, but I accidentally saw the real bill on the counter. Mom, it was less than half of what they told me. He finally looked up, eyes red, like they'd been hit by a cold wind. Mom, have they really been lying to me? This much? I placed my hand over his, not gripping, just resting, a touch that said he wasn't alone in this. Caleb, when people start hiding one thing, they have to lie about 10 others to protect it, and after a while, they can't stop. He lowered his gaze. It feels like Everything I believed. Someone just crushed it in their fist. He went on, describing everything else he had noticed. Boxes stacked in the garage, filled with newly delivered items. Tart pastries in the fridge, identical to the ones on Eli's receipts. A worker installing new lighting fixtures in the hallway. And Marina, avoiding eye contact every time he asked a direct question. Mom, I even asked her straight out, is your family really struggling or not? She just smiled. Not her usual smile, a different one. And she said, Caleb, not all hardship is visible. He shook his head. Mom, that answer, it didn't explain anything. It just felt like she was twisting the truth again. The weight in my chest pulled downward, not because of Marina, but because my son was going through something every good person faces at least once. The moment they realize their kindness has been exploited. I stood and poured him a cup of hot tea. He wrapped both hands around it as if trying to warm the cold places inside him. Mom. Yes, sweetheart? How did you endure this feeling all this time? I gave a small smile, the kind a mother earns through years of learning how to carry quiet battles. I didn't endure it, Caleb. I watched, I waited, and I trusted that one day you'd see it for yourself. Caleb stared into the steam rising from his cup. Mine clouded just the same. I hate this feeling. I hate that I didn't see it. I hate that you had to watch me be fooled. I put a hand on his shoulder. No, Caleb, this isn't your fault. People took advantage because you're good, and being good is nothing to be ashamed of. He exhaled a heavy, released breath. After a long silence, he said, Mom, I don't know what to do now. If I confront them, they'll deny everything. If I stay silent, they'll keep using me. I nodded. That's why you need more proof, not to accuse them, but so you never doubt yourself again. Caleb lifted his head, and for the first time, a faint light flickered in his eyes. So, I need to see everything more clearly? Yes. And I won't be alone? I smiled. Never. When Caleb stood to leave, I could see something different in the way he carried himself. Not weakness, but awareness, the kind of clarity pain sometimes grants us. Before opening the door, he turned back. Mom, thank you for not telling me everything right away. I asked quietly, why? He answered with a sad but honest smile. Because if you'd told me too soon, I wouldn't have believed you. But now, everything I saw myself, I can't deny it anymore. He left with a tired smile, the kind of smile a person wears when they've lost something important, but found a piece of themselves in the wreckage. As the door closed, I stood in the quiet living room with my hand over my chest, not out of pain, but out of a small, fragile relief. There is nothing lighter for a mother than seeing her child finally recognize the truth. But I also knew something else, something sharper, deeper, and far truer. Realizing the truth is only the first step. The hardest part will be what he chooses to do with it next. And I, with every ounce of a mother's love, knew one thing. I must stand beside him in the days ahead. Days when the truth might tear apart everything he once believed. Caleb left my home that afternoon in complete silence. But I knew his mind was boiling, quietly, dangerously like water just before it erupts into a rolling boil. And just as I expected, early the next morning he called. Mom, I'm going to Marina's house today, without telling them. I only said one thing. Look, very carefully. Near midday he texted, I'm here, and Mom, I think you need to hear this. I waited for Caleb to call, but he didn't. Instead, another message came. Mom, I'll explain later. There's too much. That isn't right. When he returned to my house that evening, his face carried exhaustion, anger, and a kind of disappointment so heavy it seemed to crush the space around him. He didn't sit right away. He paced, hands moving through his hair, trying to keep himself together. Mom, I think I just saw things. I can't explain anymore. I nodded gently, letting him speak at his own pace. His voice was low and rough. When I arrived, Marina wasn't home, but her dad, Bernard, was in the garage. And Mom, he was fine, not recovering from anything. He lifted a heavy wood-cutting tool. One look at it and you'd know it's not something a man fresh out of a procedure could pick up. My stomach tightened. He looked shocked when he saw me, Caleb continued, like he wasn't expecting me. And when I asked, "You're feeling better?" he said something ridiculous. Caleb mimicked the tone, flat, careless. Yeah, must be the pain meds working." He shook his head. "Mom, nobody on pain meds moves like that. It makes no sense." He paused, bracing himself. But that wasn't the worst part. Caleb stepped into Marina's house unannounced. The door wasn't locked. Inside, he heard laughter, Marina's and her mother Charlotte's. And right there on the dining table, in plain view, sat a boutique shopping bag, the same brand Marina once claimed a friend let her borrow. "Mom, they were unpacking everything right in front of me, items Marina said she couldn't afford 3 days ago." His jaw tightened. And when I asked, "What's all this?" Marina used that same soft, syrupy voice. "Oh, we found a big sale. Just lucky, I guess." He looked up at me, eyes burning. "Mom, that boutique does not do 70% off sales." I recognized the expression on his face, the exact expression Owen had years ago when he realized someone he trusted had been lying to him. Caleb continued. "I asked about the electric bill. Marina said, 'Oh, that amount was a late fee.' But Mom, the paper on the table was clearly an unpaid notice, not a late fee." He exhaled hard. She froze, just stood there. Exactly the way liars freeze when their story collapses. Then Caleb's voice dropped into something deeper, sadder. "Mom, I wish it ended there, but it didn't." He placed his phone on the table. "While I was at Marina's, Eli texted." My breath caught. He sent a picture. I opened the image beside Caleb. It was a supermarket receipt, $602.17 French champagne, Wagyu beef, lobster, imported cheeses, hazelnut tart, luxury items across the board, and the name at the bottom, Bernard Rayner. Date, 2 days earlier. The exact day Marina called Caleb crying that they had nothing to eat. Caleb's voice cracked. "Mom, I feel like someone took a hammer and brought it down on my skull." He dropped into a chair, burying his hands into his hair. "How many times did I skip lunch just to send them more? How many nights did I work overtime until I was sick? All because Marina said her parents were starving." My heart broke in places I didn't know still existed. "Sweetheart, they exploited your kindness." Caleb looked up, eyes red, not from tears, but from trying not to let them fall. "Mom, the thing that hurts most isn't the money." His voice tightened. "It's realizing they looked at my kindness and saw a wallet." Caleb went on to describe what happened right after Eli's message came through. He walked into the living room, and he heard Charlotte Marina's mother laughing as she said, "Ask him for more. He's easy. That girl of yours knows how to cry. Just tear up a bit and Caleb opens his wallet." I felt something pull deeply inside my chest. Caleb froze outside the kitchen door, hearing every word. He whispered, "Mom, I didn't even know what I felt first. Shame? Anger? Foolish? It was like they reached inside me and ripped out whatever trust I had left." But Caleb didn't yell. He didn't storm out. He didn't break anything. He walked straight into the kitchen. Marina jumped. Charlotte went pale, and Caleb asked one single question. "Am I really that easy to squeeze for money?" I could see it, the air going still, the silence cracking like thin ice. Caleb said, "Mom." Marina cried instantly, but this time, when the tears came, I felt nothing, nothing at all. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. Everything I defended, everything I believed, everything I argued with you about, Mom, it just turned to dust. When Caleb left Marina's house, Greensboro was gray, heavy, and damp, like the sky itself understood what he had just lost. He drove straight to my place. "Mom, I need you to help me through this, because if I'm alone, I think I'll break. I reached for his hand, this time holding it tight. Sweetheart, I'm right here, and you're not going through this alone. But Caleb wasn't finished. Mom, I want certainty, real certainty, not just receipts, not overheard conversations. I want the whole truth. And I knew this was the turning point, the moment the story shifts from suspicion to action. Mom, I need to see how they live, for real. I need to see it with my own eyes. I nodded. You need the truth before you confront Marina. Caleb looked at me, eyes of a man who had lost an illusion and found strength in its place. Mom, I think it's time I know everything. That night, after Caleb left my apartment, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my small kitchen table, holding a cup of peppermint tea that had long gone cold, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge, as if I were waiting for fate to knock on my door. I knew what was coming next. I knew, and it still scared me. Because when a man finally realizes he has been seen not as a husband, but as a source of income, the truth doesn't just break his marriage. It breaks something inside him, something he thought was unbreakable. A little after 11 p.m., Caleb texted, Mom, I'm going back to Marina's house. I need to see everything to the very end. I answered with only 2 words, be careful. Caleb told me everything the next morning with a voice I will never forget. It was no longer angry, it no longer trembled. It was the voice of a man who had finally stepped beyond illusion. He began like this. Mom, I went back to Marina's. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I asked, why would you do that? Caleb lowered his gaze, exhaustion in his eyes. Because if I warned them, they'd hide everything. And I want the truth, stripped bare. When he arrived, the door was unlocked. The kitchen light was still on. Everything looked exactly the same as when he'd left that afternoon, as if the house had been frozen mid-breath. He stepped into the living room, and the world he thought he knew started to slide out of place. On the coffee table sat items Marina had sworn were borrowed from friends. An Italian leather purse, high-heeled shoes still with tags on, a sealed bottle of French perfume, and 3 luxury women's watches tucked inside velvet pouches. Caleb picked up one of the watches and turned it over. The price tag was still attached. $389.99. He sighed as he told me, Mom, she didn't even bother removing the tags. It's like they were certain I'd never look close enough. He stood there for a few seconds, a man realizing the house wasn't a home, the woman wasn't a wife, and 3 years of marriage might have been nothing more than a polished performance. Caleb continued. I heard footsteps upstairs. I thought Marina was asleep, but no. As he climbed the stairs, the sound grew clearer. Drawers opening, a wooden box tapping the side of a dresser, the soft crinkle of paper. And then he stepped into the bedroom they had shared for 3 years. Marina froze. She was shoving shopping bags into the closet, dozens of them, boutiques, high-end fashion, beauty stores. All folded neatly, like someone who had practiced hiding things. Caleb stood at the doorway, looking straight at her. What are you doing? Marina went rigid. A flicker, just a flicker of calculation crossed her face before she softened into the familiar fragile expression. I'm just cleaning up. Mom made a mess earlier. Caleb cut her off. I heard it. I heard exactly what your mother said in the kitchen. The comment about how all you have to do is cry and I'll open my wallet. Marina's face drained of color. Not because he accused her, but because she never expected him to be standing outside that doorway. Caleb said, Mom, I didn't want to fight. I just wanted the truth. He walked to the closet. He opened it. And truth came pouring out like birds scattered from a shaken tree. Designer handbags, jewelry, gowns, unopened shoeboxes, towers of glossy store bags, and receipts stuffed into a box, overflowing. All of it in a pile at his feet. Caleb whispered, Mom, every item in there cost more than I make in a month. Marina rushed toward him, voice trembling. Caleb, I can explain. They're gifts, loans, sale items. You misunderstood, But Caleb wasn't listening anymore. Because something else, something worse, was buried at the bottom of the closet. a small blue notebook. Caleb picked it up, opened it, and the silence in the bedroom grew so heavy, it felt like the walls were holding their breath. Inside were handwritten entries. Feb, asked $300. Reason, electric bill. Mar, $450. Reason, dad's medicine. APR, $200. Reason, car repair. May, $1,800. Story about mom's teeth. Use only if needed. When Caleb doubts, stay silent 10 seconds plus cry. Call Eleanor mom so she softens. Never let Caleb know actual spending. Caleb's hand shook as he read. Mom. They wrote it like a business plan. Every month, every story, every tactic to manipulate me. My hand flew to my chest. It felt like something inside me twisted hard. Marina fell to her knees, sobbing, but not the way people cry when they're sorry. Caleb said he saw that instantly. Mom. She wasn't crying out of guilt. She was crying because she got caught. Charlotte, Marina's mother, heard the commotion and rushed upstairs, and the moment she spotted the notebook in Caleb's hands, she froze. Caleb asked them the question no man should ever have to ask in his own marriage. Is anything about this relationship real? Marina said nothing. Charlotte sighed, hands on her hips like someone too tired to keep pretending. Caleb, you're too good, too naive. Yes, we use some of the money, but that's what family does. You weren't giving to strangers, you were giving to your wife. Caleb stared at her. Did you really let your daughter write a ledger tracking the price of her own tears? Charlotte looked away. Caleb told me, Mom, that's when I knew the marriage had died long before I realized it. He stood up and closed the notebook. Marina cried harder, not with shame, but with desperation. Caleb, I just wanted a better life. My parents were trying. You don't understand. We needed money. Caleb answered with a line that broke me when he said it. No one needs money badly enough to sell the trust of the person who loves them. He walked out of that house in silence. No shouting, no slamming, no accusations. Just a man walking away from a dream he had held on to long after it had already ended. When he reached his car, his phone buzzed. It was Eli. 2 lines. You saw it, didn't you? I'm sorry I had to tell your mom first. Caleb replied, Thank you. Because of you, I didn't waste one more day being lied to. By the time Caleb finished telling me everything, the sun had crept over the rooftops outside. My small apartment slowly filled with light, while my son's story sank deeper into the kind of darkness only betrayal can create. I asked softly, What will you do now? Caleb looked out the window, voice calm in a way that chilled me. I'm going to file for divorce, Mom. I'm taking my life back. Then he turned to me. But tonight, I just want to sit here with you. I wrapped my arms around him, my boy, my grown son, the man I raised with everything in me, and understood something deeply. The longest, hardest journey of his life had finally reached a point of no return. But sometimes, it's right at that breaking point where a person finally begins to find themselves again. The next morning, Caleb showed up earlier than usual. He was still wearing the same dark clothes from the day before, the shirt wrinkled, hair untidy, eyes swollen from a night without sleep. But his gaze, that was the gaze of a man who had finally decided to walk out of a fire that had been burning him for 3 years. Mom, he said, voice raspy, I'm meeting a lawyer today. My chest tightened, not out of fear anymore, but because I could finally feel something loosening inside him, a crack of space where freedom could breathe. Caleb met the lawyer at noon. A coworker had recommended Harold Kent, a calm, steady, middle-aged man who looked like a stone standing in the middle of a rushing river. Caleb told me every detail of that meeting, almost word for word. Mom, when I told him everything, he wasn't surprised, not even a little. I nodded. That's because he's seen this before, sweetheart. Caleb paused before continuing. When I put Marina's notebook on his desk, the one where she wrote down every amount she asked for, Mr. Kent looked at me and said, Son, this isn't just manipulation. This is organized fraud. I inhaled sharply. Caleb whispered, Mom, I never thought I'd hear someone say that about my own wife. The meeting lasted more than 2 hours. Harold asked about everything: how many times Marina asked for money, how much Caleb had given, every receipt, every lie, every story manufactured by her parents, every tear strategically used. Every moment they said, "Just cry, Caleb will open his wallet." Then Caleb set the blue notebook on the desk. Harold pushed up his glasses and read it line by line, page by page. His expression didn't change, but Caleb said he could feel something simmering beneath that calm, a quiet anger. "Even in my profession," Harold finally said, "I've rarely seen manipulation documented this neatly." Caleb asked, "What do I do first?" Harold closed the notebook gently and placed it in front of him. "You start where your marriage ended, with the truth." Then he laid out the plan. File for divorce this week. Request full financial transparency. Give nothing more. No cash, no temporary help, no guilt money. Prepare for Marina's tactics. The crying, the pleading, the blaming, the promises, the threats. "None of it is about love," Harold said. "It's about control." Before Caleb left, Harold rested a hand on his shoulder. "Son, this is not the moment you fall apart. This is the moment you rise." But Caleb hadn't even made it out of the building when his phone buzzed relentlessly. 8 missed calls from Marina, 3 voice messages from Charlotte, 1 long text from Bernard. Harold glanced at the screen and raised an eyebrow. "It's begun." When Caleb came to my house afterward, he looked drained. "Mom," Marina cried like someone pulled her whole world out from under her. Marina's first message: "Caleb, come home. I need you. I'm sorry. I swear I'll change." The second: "You don't understand. I'm under pressure. My parents need help." The third: "If you do this, you'll destroy my family. Is that what you want?" Caleb's hand trembled with anger and heartbreak. "Mom, they think this is about not wanting to help them. Not one of them mentioned love, not once." Then came Charlotte's voice message. Caleb put it on speaker. Her voice was sweet, the kind of sweetness that coats poison. "Caleb, darling, good men don't abandon their wives during hard times. Marina did what any woman would do to support her family. Don't let your mother fill your head with doubt. Don't ruin your marriage over money." I clenched my fists. Caleb looked at me helplessly. "Mom, they're blaming you." I shrugged quietly. "When people don't take responsibility for their actions, sweetheart, they always look for someone else to blame." But Bernard's message was the one that stunned Caleb. It said, "A real man doesn't bring up money as a reason for divorce. It's petty." Caleb said, his voice sinking low, "Mom, I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. 3 years of lies, and they call it petty." That evening, Marina showed up at Caleb's door. He didn't open it, but through the small window beside the door, he saw her hair messy, mascara smudged, hands clenched together, standing in perfect costume as the tragic heroine. She said everything she thought might work. "Please, give me a chance. It was all a misunderstanding. That notebook wasn't my idea. Everyone makes mistakes. You'll never find anyone who loves you like I do. If you leave me, my life is over." Caleb stood behind the door and said nothing. Later, he told me, "Mom, for the first time in 3 years, I realized she wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for continued access." Marina stayed outside for almost 45 minutes, crying, begging, clawing at the door, acting. Then the crying faded. Silence followed, and her footsteps eventually dragged away from the porch. Caleb whispered, "Mom, I stood there afterward, feeling empty. Not because I wanted her back, but because I finally felt sorry for myself, for how long I loved the wrong person." The next morning, Marina sent one last message. "If you divorce me, it will be your mother's fault." Caleb read it, deleted it, did not reply. That was the moment my son officially walked out of a 3-year cycle of manipulation. That afternoon, he came to my house. He sank into the chair across from me, looking like a man who had walked through a storm and survived. Mom, I filed for divorce. I took his hand. Caleb let out a small, pained smile, the kind that carries relief inside the hurt. I thought I'd fall apart doing it, but Mom, it felt like someone finally opened a window in a suffocating room. I can breathe again. Tears stung the back of my eyes. Sweetheart, I whispered. A marriage without love isn't a home. It's just a place where people use each other. Caleb leaned back, exhaling. I regret losing 3 years, but I don't regret today. That night, I made us tea. Caleb stared into his cup for a moment before saying softly, Mom, the most painful part isn't losing Marina. The most painful part is realizing how long I forgot myself. I placed my hand over his. But you found yourself again, and that is worth everything. Caleb nodded, eyes finally showing a quiet light. I'll be okay, Mom, I promise. And for the first time in months, I knew he meant it. The temporary hearing was scheduled for a gray Tuesday morning in Greensboro. The whole city looked washed in a pale layer of winter light. The rows of trees, the parking lot, even my own thoughts as I stepped out of my old car. Caleb walked ahead of me, not rushed, not shaking, not angry, just steady. The calm kind that comes when a man has finally walked far enough from the storm to know he's not drowning anymore. Attorney Harold Kent waited on the courthouse steps, black briefcase in hand, eyes sharp as a blade, but his voice was warm. Caleb, all we need today is one thing, the truth. Caleb nodded. I placed a gentle hand on my son's shoulder. He looked back at me and said quietly, Mom, I'm okay. And this time, I believed him. Inside the hearing room, Marina was already seated. She wore a deep blue dress, hair pulled back, makeup soft and subtle, the picture of a heartbroken but hopeful wife. Beside her sat Charlotte and Bernard, both wearing expressions of grave injustice, as if they were the victims of some great misunderstanding. Marina lifted her eyes toward Caleb, that familiar watery look, the small, trembling smile, crafted to stir sympathy. Caleb didn't react. He simply sat down, straight-backed, eyes forward. The hearing began. Harold stood and addressed the court. Your Honor, this is not a complicated financial dispute. This is a divorce rooted in deliberate deception, where one party repeatedly fabricated emergencies, emotional crises, and financial disasters to extract money from her spouse over a period of 3 years. Marina bowed her head and began to cry. Charlotte squeezed her daughter's hand dramatically. Bernard shook his head with an exaggerated sigh. But Harold remained steady. We have clear evidence, including a notebook documenting every fabricated excuse, every emotional tactic, and every coordinated effort between the members of this household to ensure Caleb remained financially bound to them. A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Marina looked up sharply. She hadn't expected Caleb to submit the notebook. Harold set the blue notebook on the table. The soft thud echoed through my chest like a gavel. Your Honor, we submit this notebook as Exhibit A. Marina's attorney jumped up. Objection. This notebook is unverifiable. Anyone could have written those. Harold interrupted gently, almost too politely. We have handwriting samples from Marina's personal letters to Caleb from their first 2 years of marriage. And the handwriting matches. Perfectly. Marina's face drained of color. Bernard shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Caleb's gaze. Charlotte stared out the window, lips pressed tight. Harold continued, voice stronger now. In addition, we have receipts from the local supermarket, luxury groceries totaling over $600, purchased on the very day Marina called Caleb in tears, claiming her family had no food. We have witness statements from store employees and corroborating information from the neighbor across the street. I heard Marina inhale sharply, like someone choking on their own breath. Her attorney tried one more angle. My client is experiencing severe emotional strain. She has been under pressure. The financial hardship pushed her. Harold sighed softly, almost sympathetically. Pressure does not turn a person into a coordinated fraud. Pressure does not teach someone to weaponize tears. Pressure does not justify 3 years of manipulation. The silence that followed was heavy. I could hear someone's pen drop in the back of the room. Then it was Caleb's turn. He stood, no paper in hand, no notes, just his own exhausted heart. For 3 years, I don't even know what I was living in anymore. I thought it was love. I thought I was taking care of someone I loved. Caleb looked at Marina, not with anger, but with the tired clarity of someone who has finally woken up. But every time you cried, every time you asked for money, you weren't asking because you needed me. You were asking because you knew I wouldn't say no. Marina burst into tears, the kind meant to collapse a man. Caleb didn't move. I skipped lunches to send money. I worked overtime. I lied to my mother. I blamed myself when I couldn't give more. And in the end, I found out it was all written down in a notebook. He placed his hand on the blue cover. You didn't break this marriage with one mistake. You broke it with every line you wrote. The room went still. Charlotte gripped Marina's hand tightly. Bernard stared at the floor, face red. Their attorney shuffled papers, hands shaking slightly. Caleb took a breath. I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to close a door I should have closed a long time ago. He sat down. Harold placed a hand on his shoulder, a silent nod of approval. When Marina was invited to speak, she didn't cry as loudly as before. She looked at Caleb, eyes red, voice trembling, but sharp underneath. I did what I did because your mother kept interfering in our marriage. If you had let me handle things, I wouldn't have needed my family's help. Harold muttered under his breath, loud enough for the judge to hear. Gaslighting, level 3. I nearly laughed, though the moment was far too heavy for laughter. Marina continued. I just wanted a peaceful life. If I made mistakes, it's because I loved you too much. Caleb answered quietly. Love doesn't need a script. Marina lowered her head. For the first time, she had no comeback. The hearing wrapped up after nearly 2 hours. The judge issued the temporary rulings. Caleb owed no financial support during separation. Marina must provide full financial records within 14 days. No direct contact. All communication must go through attorneys. When we stepped out of the courtroom, Marina rushed after Caleb. Caleb, please! Don't do this! We can still fix! Caleb turned, not cold, just resolute. You had 3 years to fix it. Right now, you're not trying to save our marriage. You're trying to save your benefits. Marina froze. Charlotte tugged her arm sharply. That's enough, Marina. Let's go. Bernard muttered something under his breath, something about ungrateful men. But not loud enough to risk being heard. Caleb didn't look back. He walked straight toward the parking lot where I was waiting. When he got into the passenger seat, he didn't cry. He just exhaled. The long, shaking breath of someone finally putting down a weight he had carried for his entire adult life. Mom, I think I just got myself back. I placed my hand over his. Sweetheart, sometimes people need to go through the wrong marriage to learn how to choose the right life. Caleb smiled faintly, a smile with less pain in it than the one before. I'll be okay, Mom. I really will. And even though the sky stayed gray, without a hint of sun, I could feel it. A dark chapter in my son's life had quietly closed, and a brighter one wide and waiting was finally beginning. A week after the hearing, Greensboro began sliding into late winter. The trees lining Summit Avenue were almost completely bare, their branches stretching thin against the silver sky. The air had that clean, cold stillness that makes you want to curl inward, but also whispers that no matter how chaotic life gets, eventually, everything settles. That morning, Caleb called me. Mom, I'm moving out of the old apartment today. His voice sounded lighter than it had in weeks, not cheerful but unburdened. I want to start somewhere else. I said, I'll be there. The apartment Caleb had shared with Marina sat on the 3rd floor of an old red brick building. When we walked in, sunlight poured through the big window and spread across the wooden floor, the same floor that had witnessed everything. The joy of their early days, Marina's tears, the nights Caleb waited for messages, the last months of suspicion and pain. But now, It was just an empty room. Marina had taken almost everything that was hers. What remained were the things Caleb had bought with his own money. A small wooden table, a single chair, a set of 2 cups, and the toolbox I'd given him in his first year working. Caleb stood in the middle of the living room, hands in his pockets, and took a long breath. Mom, for 3 years I stood here thinking I had a life. He was quiet for a moment. But all I really had was an empty space. I didn't rush to comfort him. Some moments, people have to hear their own hearts crack and then feel them slowly knit back together. He turned slowly, taking in the bare walls, the faded marks on the floor. Mom, I don't regret loving. I just regret loving the wrong person. We began packing up what was left. In the kitchen cabinets, a few plain white bowls. In the bedroom, a faint trace of Marina's perfume still lingered in the closet. The scent Caleb once liked because it smelled like new beginnings. I watched him open the closet door and stare at the empty space where her clothes used to hang. He reached out and touched the bare metal bar once, then let his hand fall. Such a small gesture, but it felt like a quiet nod to himself. It's over. A kind of goodbye that didn't need words. At the very back of the last drawer, Caleb found something he hadn't expected. A small photo album, the cheap kind Marina once said she would use for husband and wife memories. Inside, it was empty. Not a single picture. Caleb let out a short, almost amused breath. Mom, even the album didn't have a place for me. I rested my hand on his shoulder. It's not because you weren't worthy of being there. It's because you were with someone who never understood what it means to cherish anything. Caleb closed the album, not with anger, not with sorrow. More like someone closing the back cover of a book they'd finally finished. We finished packing just before noon. Caleb locked the door, handed the key to the landlord, then turned to look at the closed door one last time. Mom, I don't know what my life will look like from here, but I know for sure it won't look like the last 3 years. I smiled. Then that means you've already started living. We walked down the stairs together. Each step felt lighter than the last. That evening, Caleb came over for dinner. I made his favorite beef stew, the recipe I'd cooked for him since he was a little boy. It was just the 2 of us at the table, but the quiet peace between us filled the whole kitchen. Caleb told me about the new apartment, smaller, simpler, but chosen by him. Mom, I want to set everything up myself, like a blank page. He took a bite, then leaned back in his chair. For 3 years, I thought the way to keep someone was to keep giving more and more, but it turns out, the person who really loves you doesn't need you to save them. I nodded. You didn't lose 3 years, Caleb. You spent 3 years learning a lesson some people spend their whole lives never understanding. He looked up at me, eyes clearer than I'd seen them in a long time. I don't hate Marina. I just feel sorry for her. Because if you've never understood love, you're always going to treat it like a resource. I squeezed his hand. One day, you'll meet someone different, someone who doesn't need tricks to be loved. Caleb smiled, and for the first time, there was a little warmth in it. After dinner, he stood by the window, looking out over the street. A thin veil of mist floated past the glass. The streetlights cast a soft yellow glow over the trees, making the city look strangely calm. Caleb spoke softly, almost to himself. Mom, I used to think a broken marriage was the end of everything, but this feels more like I'm finally getting up after a very long pain. He turned toward me. I don't know what my future will hold, but I know I'm never going back into that darkness. I walked over and stood beside him, one arm around his shoulders. Sweetheart, sometimes people have to go through a mistake just to meet the strongest part of themselves. Caleb nodded. We stood there for a long time, watching the mist drift across the rooftops like a new chapter quietly opening. A chapter with no lies, no manipulation, no blue notebook, just truth. Quiet and possibility. Before Caleb left, he turned to me, his eyes deep but lighter. Thank you, Mom, for saving me from something I couldn't admit to myself. I lifted my hand to his cheek, this man I'd once carried in my arms, who had just walked through a storm and was still standing. No, Caleb, you saved yourself. I was just the one holding the light so you could see the road. He smiled, a full, honest smile. Then he hugged me, tight, like the little boy who used to be afraid of thunder but always believed his mother would be there. He isn't that little boy anymore, but the light in him, I could see it more clearly than ever. When Caleb left, I stood at the doorway and watched him walk down the sloping street toward the main road. Every step was steady, no rushing, no stumbling, no looking back. A man, walking out of the shadow of a wrong marriage. And I stood there, grateful, because my son had finally found his way back into the light. 2 years after that hearing, Greensboro changed in the kind of way only time can explain. The streets Caleb used to drive through with sleepless, red-rimmed eyes now looked softer, brighter. And Caleb himself, the boy who once stood on my doorstep with a heart shattered beyond words, had become someone entirely different. A man rebuilt from the wreckage, a man who walked out of the dark on his own 2 feet. I'm telling this last part from the old porch swing outside my house, where the afternoon sunlight falls like warm honey across the wooden boards. Caleb had just left. He came to show me a paper, a black and white ultrasound photo with a tiny little dot he kept calling a miracle. "Mom," he said, his eyes shining in a way I had never seen before. "I'm going to be a dad." I placed my fingers on the photo, just a faint shape, smaller than a bean, and somehow it melted every hard edge left inside me. "And the baby's mother?" I asked, though I already knew. Caleb smiled, a small, settled smile. "Regina, I think you're going to love her." I'd met Regina a year earlier. On an evening, Caleb invited me over for dinner at his new apartment. She stepped out of the kitchen wearing a soft linen apron, curls tied back, a wooden spoon in one hand, and eyes so warm and steady that I knew right away. This woman was clean, gentle water flowing back into my son's life. Regina wasn't talkative, she wasn't flashy, she didn't try to prove she was kind. She just asked where I wanted to sit, whether I had any food allergies, and if I preferred herbal tea. That was it, and it was enough. The way Caleb looked at her while she ladled soup into bowls, there was no fear in that look, no tiptoeing, no shrinking. For the first time, I saw my son love someone without losing himself. A month after that dinner, Caleb told me he and Regina had decided to move in together. "Mom, with Regina, I don't have to justify anything. She doesn't ask how much I make. She doesn't want anything from me. She only wants to know if I'm happy." Then he said a sentence I've held in my heart to this day. "Mom, I don't have to rescue her. And she doesn't try to rescue me. We just choose each other." I understood. That's the kind of love a man can only have after he's loved the wrong person once and found his way back to solid ground. 2 years passed like water. Caleb got promoted. He started saving money again. He went to the gym, hiked mountains, went fishing with coworkers on weekends. He refinished the little wooden table in his apartment, the only thing he kept from his old marriage, as a quiet reminder. This is where I stood back up. Eli, the cashier who once sent me those receipts, is now one of Caleb's close friends. He and his wife have come over for dinner several times. They laugh, talk about the Carolina Panthers, gas prices, Lexington barbecue. No shadows linger in my kitchen anymore. And Hermione, the neighbor who warned me about the luxury cars in Marina's driveway, still drops off jars of homemade strawberry jam now and then with a note. "The boy is living well, Eleanor. See?" "Yes, I see." "And Marina?" The last I heard, her family left Greensboro not long after the divorce. Stories about them faded like waves breaking against rock, loud at first, then gone. I don't hate them anymore. The truth has already done its work. Justice had its say, the rest isn't mine to carry. What is mine is my son, a new Caleb, one who no longer bows his head to be used, one who no longer mistakes manipulation for love, one who no longer believes he's not enough. Now Caleb sits in my living room, his hand resting gently on Regina's belly, as if placing his entire heart there. This afternoon, before he left, he said, "Mom, sometimes I think that if those 3 years hadn't happened, I'd never have met Regina. I'd never have learned how to love without losing myself." I looked at him, the man I once thought had broken into pieces. "Son, not every breaking is the end. Some things crack open so the light can come in. Caleb smiled, slow and soft. I know that now, Mom. As I tell this part, the sky over Greensboro is turning a pale lavender. A light breeze moves across the porch, carrying the smell of wet grass after the noon drizzle. I look down at the ultrasound in my hands, then out at the quiet street. The same road Caleb once walked down in pain, then in survival, and now, in hope. 2 years ago, he stood at my door, unable to speak through the hurt. Today, he stood there holding a tiny promise of a future in his hand. It's the most remarkable journey I've ever witnessed. Not a journey of running away from what broke him, but a journey of finding himself again. And maybe, that's a journey every one of us will have to take once in our lives. If this story reminds you that life still holds brighter doors ahead, even after the kind of pain that nearly crushes you, leave me a small sign by clicking like. And if you'd like to walk with me through more real, tender, deeply human journeys like this one, you can subscribe, so we'll meet again in the next story. Thank you for walking this road with me. We all have the strength to step out of the dark. All we need is a light to guide us and a little courage to keep going.